Hi everyone, Dom Famularo here, back for the Sessions panel at a distance. This is so great that I get a chance to meet so many great musicians. Today, I have with me Paul Pesco. Paul, session guitarist, singer-songwriter, film score composer, record producer. Man, you're wearing a lot of hats, and we want to hear all about them.
They all fit on this head. It's weird. Well, I love every aspect of creating music and just the whole process, and very fortunate to be around around some of the best engineers, musicians, arrangers, producers. And I've gleaned much information from all of them. So I really appreciate all my friends and teachers, and maintain an attitude of gratitude.
I love it, Paul. And that really is the name of the game. And you do that so well. And you've been involved with so many great musicians and so many great situations. And I want to hear all about it. But I want to go back to the beginning. I know your dad was an opera singer. Tell me about the beginning stage as far as how you kind of got involved with music.
In the early days, I mean, it's funny because my dad's an opera singer and music teacher. He went to school. He went to Fredonia and did the whole thing of getting his degree to become a school teacher. But then at the same time, he was going to Eastman School of Music. He just is very passionate about music and passionate about opera. So my first memories of music are my father practicing or singing in the house, and us all just like holding our ears, watching TV, going, "Oh my God, is he gonna?" Donna mobile, quatuna vento, like all the Puccini and Verdi, and beautiful. It's funny how that music has popped up in things that I play sometimes when I play solos, or I remember using a Puccini aria. I just started because it would just fit over this chord progression, and I was playing a solo, but it was a trick. They said, "Okay, well, listen, I want to do something. I want to." Let's turn this is when in the days of tape, we would, turn the tape upside down and it would be playing backwards, and then you play a guitar solo backwards. But I ended up playing this melody from Puccini backwards. And then as we flipped the tape over, it was just unbelievable. It was so cool. I know Jimmy Page did that a lot. The riff from Black Dog is something that he came up with backwards. That. So stuff like that is very interesting. I love experimentation, but then drawing from the masters. But it's funny how unconsciously I was inspired and influenced from this music that I heard as a child, and that was just really, I wasn't even thinking about music as something that I would do. It was around. And it's funny how things like that just seep into your consciousness.
Absolutely. So how did
in a very abstract way,
Yeah, totally. So when did guitar come into your life?
When I was about 12, about 10, 11, around those years. My father actually always had a guitar around the house, but it was like an old Stella or something like that, and it had like one or two strings, and I used it to shoot bow and arrow. I would loosen the string enough so I could shoot an arrow with it. My dad got a part in a film in Germany. I remember that Gustav Knut, who's like this big star in Germany, a film star, was the starring actor of this film, and he had a part in it where he would sing, but he had to play guitar. It was like this guy who then would play guitar in a very basic way and sing along, but it turned out that he had a performance that one of the days of the shooting, and so there was a conflict, and so then they decided to go with somebody else. But my father had bought this acoustic guitar. He goes, "Oh, well, we got a guitar here now." So that guitar became mine, and it was like this, acoustic. So I actually just started learning songs, listening to Simon and Garfunkel, James Taylor, like stuff like the folky. Basic first position chords, but I learned like the Boxer, House of the Rising Sun, I think was the first song I ever learned. So I'm kind of showing my age.
What was it like? You were learning these tunes, you hear them on the radio at the time,
we were living in Germany. So this is we lived in Germany for 5 years. We moved there in 1968, summer of 1968. They put me back into fourth grade. I'm like, what? I just passed. But meanwhile, I didn't know that fourth grade Germany is like sixth grade in America.
Yeah, really.
The information and math and everything. So it was accelerated. It's very cool. But when we would go to English class, they were like, the English teacher's like, well, you can sit here, but I know you know all of this. So I said, well, you have a guitar over there. Can I go practice guitar in the hallway? So I would go practice while in my classroom, they were learning English. Then I'd come back at the end of class and they said, well, can you play something for us? And then I would play like whatever song I had been working on. And immediately got into play guitar, perform for people, But growing up around the opera theater, my father would often get us parts in the various operas. In La Boheme, there's a part where there's a street scene where there's so everybody in the family got a part, and I actually got a solo in a couple of different operas where I would be, as a boy soprano, I would be singing. He says he's coming, ooh, Johnny's kiki, stuff like that, or in La Boheme. Mein Trompete, whatever. I forget exactly what I was singing.
How beautiful. So here you are on
stage. But I was used to performing in front of people, getting in front of people. I had no stage fright. No, I was just like, yeah, come on, let's do this.
Well, that, from your family tradition of how you were learning, this sounds like it's a real blessing that you were gifted this potential.
The initial experience of it's just, isn't this what everybody does? Isn't everybody's dad an opera singer? And then you get a part and just, it was fun. It was like playing and you got paid for it,
So you moved back to New York?
To New York in 1974, in the summer of 74, and went right into ninth grade. And while living in Germany, I would listen to the Armed Forces Network, the AFN, late 60s, early 70s. So the music that was on the radio was a mixture of things. There would be like Deep Purple playing Hush. The first Zeppelin record was just about to come out, but on pop radio, on AFN, they would be playing, Bobby Womack, the Spinners, James Brown. I was getting like an education in funk and soul music just because I was listening to the radio just to hear things in English, but I ended up falling in love with that music. Starting, it's funny, listening to folk music, but then going just kind of absorbing all this funk and soul, which was pop. And then I discovered Jimi Hendrix. Basically, one of my older sister's friends just left these 2 albums, were just at our house and nobody ever claimed them. And so they became mine. It was Jimi Hendrix Smash Hits and Band of Gypsies. Those 2 records did not leave the turntable for years. I every note, every nuance on Band of Gypsies, I just, absorbed. And man, I was just like, how does he get that sound? I was obsessed with that. It was just unimaginable to me how he was getting this sound. I just knew that I wanted to try to get that sound myself.
How powerful that you had that level of influence of hearing these recordings. So were you starting to take lessons at any point?
I did, actually. It's funny because I still have my books. It's Wir lernen Gitarre spielen is the name of it. Let's see, I think they're up on the shelf here. I have amongst my amps, I still have my my guitar books and stuff, but I had already been taking piano lessons since I was a little kid. And so I started about like at 6 years old with piano lessons. So I was familiar with reading manuscript and relating the written note to the played note. It just took me a while to really become a proficient, to be a better sight reader. In today's world, a lot of people, go, well, why do I have to know how to read? The Beatles didn't know how to read. It's like, well, why would you not want to be able to? I always equate it to a town. All the streets, but you can't read the street signs. They just help you. It helps you know where you are. It helps you to, it's only a plus to learn how to read music. It's not easy. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor.
It's a learned skill and it just takes a little bit of time, but it's going to open you up to a whole other world. So now, when did you first start playing with other musicians and jamming?
It kind of started in the hallway in the high-rise building that we were living in Germany. A couple of the other kids that lived in the building also played guitar. And so we'd get our acoustic guitars and we'd jam in the hallway. That was kind of the first jamming. Yeah. But It's funny. There was another album that was highly influential, and it was Santana Abraxas. It's something I listen to a lot, and also Carlos is just incredible. Just how he has a simple way of playing, but it's so it just connects right to the heart, and that was really influential on me. Just the way he sings, it's as if he's singing, but the guitar is his voice.
He is absolutely speaking to us. The guitar is absolutely a voice that he clearly speaks, and he speaks directly to our heart and our soul.
To the soul, exactly. And, it's funny. I actually work with Michael Carabello very closely now, who is like the guy who formed the band with Carlos. He told me the story. It's I mean, we can get into it, but they were getting kicked out of the Fillmore West in San Francisco. They used to sneak in when they were like 15, 16 years old. Carlos and Michael, and they didn't have any money. They wanted to go see shows, so they would sneak in the back way, and they had made these little counterfeit passes. And security caught them one time, and they're like being let out by their collars. And they say, "Oh, we're here to see Mr. Graham, Bill Graham. We're a band. We're a band." They're like, "Yeah, right. Okay. Get out." And right at that moment, Bill Graham walks by, and they're like, Mr. Graham, we're here to see you. We have a demo. We're a band." He goes, "Oh yeah, what are you called?" And Carlos is like, "I don't know." Michael Carabello said, "Santana Blues Band." And Bill Graham said, "Well, give me your tape." He gave him the tape, and I guess they had written their number on it or something. Not a week later or so, the opening act didn't show for some, like, opening up for the Dead or something, or for Jefferson Airplane. Bill Graham's office called them, and they said, "Well, can you come down and do the opening? Be the opening act tonight?" And from that point on, Bill basically took them under his wing, and Monterey Pop, and the rest is history. They just.
The fact that you have access to these stories and people hear these stories, the music industry is still that way. It's still kind of putting yourself in situations. But I want you to tell a story about, you became a rehearsal technician at SIR Studios in New York.
I did.
That really kind of opened up a whole other door of opportunity for yourself. Just tell that story.
Okay, I joined this band with a couple of guys. One of the guys, this guy Jeff Ross, had toured with Lou Reed. He was a rhythm guitar player for Lou and would sing harmony vocals. And to me, at that point, I was like 17 years old. This guy was like the most successful musician I had ever met. He toured with Lou Reed, amazing. So we formed a band. We had this group called Teaser with a Z. So it's how Long Island, huh? We played, Speaks. Jeff and Leighton, who are the bass player and guitarist, and lead singer. Jeff was the lead singer. They knew a guy, this guy Ashley Pandell, who owned a club called Ashley's, which was the rock and roll club in the 70s. Like, everybody would be there. It's right on 5th Avenue and 13th Street. Jeff and Leighton also knew this guy, Chris Charlesworth, who was the American editor for Melody Maker magazine. And so they went and wouldn't leave Chris's house until he listened to the demo tape that we had made. Chris really liked it, though. So he said, "Let me bring this to Ashley and see what he thinks." And they both said, "No, I love it. I love it. These guys are rocking." So they started managing us. So they put us up in SIR for a month to rehearse. And then we did this big showcase for everybody. And that's basically how I was introduced to SIR, through actually as a client, as playing, working in the studio. And one day, one of the techs that was setting up for us, this guy Orville, I don't remember Orville's last name, but one day Orville wasn't there, and I'm like, "Hey, what happened to Orville? Where is he?" And they said, "Oh, he doesn't work here anymore." I'm like, "Oh, that's too bad." He goes, No, it's the good thing." He said, "Why?" He goes, he's playing bass in Stars now, which is, I'm like, "Stars? That's a signed band." He says, "What do you mean? The guy that was setting up my gear is now playing in a signed band. He's out on the road touring." And like, I put two and two together. I said, "Well, I'm getting a job here." But, I didn't actually, a lot of people do that, and they actually would frown upon, using the place as a stepping stone. But it's a place where I met everybody. And a lot of the people that were there have gone on to amazing accomplishments. So I met Madonna there. She came in to audition, because they would hold auditions, and he would have huge rehearsals. I was setting up for Blondie, for Foreigner, Kiss was on the soundstage, Shakti, John McLaughlin and Shakti. They would be leaving like these notes. I'm like looking at these, like, this is how they do it. They count out they would be just numbers in a row, a sequence of numbers. But Peter Tosh would be there, so I was exposed and setting up gear for everybody, for like Aerosmith. And for me, it was a dream. I was like, this is incredible.
At that time, Madonna was just a young performer.
Unknown. She was unknown.
Comes into the play. She's looking for a band.
No, she was actually auditioning to be a background singer.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it was Patrick Hernandez, the guy who sings "Born to Be Alive." You were born, born to be alive. Born to, that song. He was holding auditions. I'd say about 300 girls came through. It was 54th Street that day. It was like this cattle call. Just one of the two girls that came into the office, there's like a front office there, and was talking to me or complaining about something. One of the two was Madonna, and she came in. So, what do you do here? She had this attitude. I was like, well, it's funny. She made an impression upon me, because I was like, well, I just remember meeting her, and she was one of the three girls that got the gig. So eventually, it's funny, because I then left SIR, and I had gotten a gig playing on an album for RCA, for Hologram Records, for a new artist named Keith Soros. But Ellie Greenwich produced that album. Ellie Greenwich and Jeff Kent, who's a keyboard player from I think from Dreams, the band Dreams.
Yeah, Dreams, yeah.
Yeah, which this is Weckl, it's Michael Brecker, it's incredible. But Jeff was the keyboard player. He was the production partner of Ellie Greenwich, of course, who is the famous songwriter. So from that point on, I ended up getting a job working at SIR, worked there for about a year or so. And while there, I met so many people. And as I had left, I would still, hang around sometimes and see my friends. But I had befriended the band Atlantic Star. I was living in White Plains at the time, and they lived just outside of White Plains. And so they had their van. And so after rehearsal, they would wait for me. I'd like clean up, and they'd say, "Come on, Paul," because I would ride home with them. They don't even have to take the train or something. So they dropped me off, and we became very, very close friends. And they were getting ready to tour in 1982. And for the summer 82, it was the Radiance album. The album was called Radiance, and so it was the Radiance tour. They offered me the gig, being the kind of the utility man, singing backgrounds, playing guitar, any second guitar parts, or even playing a string part on the Prophet 5. So I got the gig, and that was my first tour in summer of 82. When I was working with Keith Soros, we would rehearse before we went into the studio. The pre-production was at a studio called Gotham Sound, which was in the music building, the famous music building on 8th Avenue. This studio was owned by a lady called Camille Barboni, who initially was Madonna's manager. So one day I come out of rehearsal, and I see that girl again, Madonna. I'm like, "Hey, how you doing? What's going on?" It turns out she had left the Patrick Hernandez camp and came back to the States, and had connected with Stephen Bray and the guys from Breakfast Club. And she had been working on some solo stuff and solo material, and Camille was managing her, and she was the owner of the studio where we were rehearsing. So it's all kind of random and by chance. Yeah. I end up coming out of rehearsal, and I run into I see that girl, Madonna. "Hey, how are you doing?" I say to her. She goes, "Hey, I'm like, "What?" Because your band really sucks. I'm like, "Oh yeah, well, it's not really, it's a gig I'm doing here." I'm like, she goes, "But no, but I really like you. I think you should be in my band." I'm like, "Really? Well, cool. I'm down to play, because my aim was, I want to be a session player. I want to play with everybody. If this is a gig, I'm in. And I liked her. I thought she was cool. I said, "Well, how do I know what I need to hear your voice though. What do you sound like?" And so she right there sang for me, and had that tone that she had for that first album, that kind of the tone that she sang, Lucky Star, Burning Up and all that. I was like, whoa, okay. She was definitely a better singer than the person I'd been rehearsing with. So I was like, well, what do we do? She goes, come back here Saturday, wear something cool, and here's charts. She had charts written out. John Gordon was the original guitar player, and he had written out charts and really detailed. And so it really helped me. And he even had like a thing, he had the same watch I had, the Casio data bank. It says you have to use the alarm and put it into the pickup and put the digital delay set on this sound, And so I had all those things. So I was the perfect guitar player to take his place. And Madonna, so I ended up joining her band, and we were getting $30 per rehearsal. I would ride the train in. So I was like, man, I'm doing a session. I'm working with this new artist, Madonna. I'm working on this album. And so that was kind of the beginning of my session career.
What's important here, Paul, is the fact that it's the networking concept, that you were a good person, you knew your instrument, and you were meeting people, and you were open to new ideas, and you were open to the band, and you were making yourself available to work. And that really is networking at its best.
Yeah, I think that's my strong suit, or the strong point of my personality, or how I am. I'm like a voracious networker. But I'm also I just would play incessant. I'd be like my parents would be like, my mom's Korean, my father's Sicilian, so I have like this mix. They say fire on both sides, but my mom would wake my father up. My room was directly above theirs, so it was like, she'd be, Peter, wake up, Peter. He said, what's wrong, Mary? He goes, Pa, you play guitar all night long, plinky all night long. Put guitar away, school tomorrow. My mom, she gets mad at me. She goes, I don't talk like that, Paul. It's a caricature, I guess. But I literally would play, and I'd be in my bed sleeping with, practicing scales and stuff, just playing.
Fantastic. So you're working on this stuff here. You're hooking up with Madonna. Now you go on the first Virgin tour in 1985. Well,
okay. This is interesting. Backtrack a little bit to the end of the Atlantic Star tour. The tour's over. We rode all night long. Everybody sleeps on the bus. We all wake up, and we're like in Jersey. We're like, oh wow, here we are. We're going over the bridge, going over the George Washington Bridge into the city. They turn on the radio, and it's KTU, WKTU, right? 92 KTU, which is the big one of the big R&B stations in New York. And all of a sudden I hear, everybody get up, dance and sing. I'm like, that's Madonna. That's Madonna. Madonna's on the radio. I'm like, I was freaking out, and they're like, who's Madonna? What are you talking about? And it's always a funny story when we get together. They're like, oh my God, who's Madonna? Right. So, but she had gotten signed. And immediately when I got home, I was like calling her. I was like, Madonna, I heard you on the radio. She goes, yes, this is amazing. I got signed. Seymour Stein signed me to Sire Records. In fact, I want you to play on the record. Reggie Lucas was the original producer of the first Madonna album. And it's funny, she had a big argument with him or something, and she ended up firing him. She fired Reggie, who to me was like this infamous guitarist who was like Miles Davis's guitar player. I'm like, unbelievable. But, since she had the argument with him, and then she said, no, I want to work with Jelly Bean. So she hired Jelly Bean, and then they brought me in to replace. I actually replaced Reggie's guitar on Lucky Star. And I don't think we had already been playing. Burning Up was a demo that I had played on, and doing all the harmonics and stuff. So I had already kind of worked out parts that I was going to play. But on Lucky Star, they said, well, just play something. And I was totally into, I'd been playing with Atlantic Star, and I had been listening to a lot of R&B radio. And there was a band called Sky. They have a song called Call Me. Call Me. Call me. And the part in that song, the guitar part is this. It's a call me. So it's funny. That became like, that was one of those New York City things, the fourths, playing that suspended chord like that. And if you listen to Lucky Star, you hear me kind of playing doing that little New York City thing, and so I came up with that part in like 20 minutes, and it was done. And she's like, oh, this is perfect. This is great. It's great. And and then that song just went on. It was like the second or third, I think it was the third single off that album, and it went top 10. And so I was just, I would hear it on the radio everywhere. And so for me, that was just the most amazing experience. Here, I still never get tired of hearing something I played on the radio.
I mean, you're living the dream now. You're starting to hear this. It's all coming together. You're starting to become even more inspired to fully commit yourself to this industry. This is powerful.
Yes, it is. And the fact that Lucky Star was a big hit and people were starting to associate me with that was the beginning of my rise as a session player, or people knowing, like being familiar with my name and the sound that I could bring to the table. Mm-hmm. It's funny. There's that old joke, the various phases of a career. Like, who's Paul Pesco? Get me Paul Pesco. Get me a young Paul Pesco. And then finally, who's Paul Pesco? Unknown, known. Get me a young one. And then, oh yeah, who is he? But there's I guess some truth to that. I really do love it. I love the creative aspect. I know that it's interesting. There's a certain, there oftentimes I scratch my head because I hear stuff that I think should be more successful and it isn't. And then sometimes I'm scratching my head about something that is like hugely successful, but you never know why exactly, But I know that a lot of social media has a lot to do with it. TikTok can bring old hits back, which is really cool.
Which is pretty amazing. But I understand what you're saying. It's hard to predict at all from our generation of how music that we grew up with to what is happening today. There really is a bit of an adaptation that we constantly learn. But I got to ask you now. So you're playing with these bands, you're doing this thing. Where'd the film scoring composition part come in? Where did that come in?
I started working a lot in New York in the 80s, or still the 70s and 80s. There was the recording industry, so to speak, was very based regionally, of course. Like there was the New York scene, there was the LA scene, there was the Nashville, and even Chicago. Chicago had like a vibrant commercial industry. They did a lot of sessions, a lot of jingles. Like Richard Marx's father is a big producer, and I know Pat Leonard worked for him. And a lot of guys came up through that. I started getting work playing on commercials, and those would generally be in the morning to the afternoon, and then record sessions would be in the evening. But I remember starting to get calls, and I also learned that there was an answering service that you needed to be on. Besides joining the union, you needed to be on Radio Registry, which was this great answering service. And so I joined that, and you'd then be on the list, and they'd go down the list. They'd say, oh, we want Jeff Mironoff. Oh, he's booked. They'll go down the list. Oh, Ira Siegel. Oh no, let's get Larry Saltzman. Okay, Paul Pesco. So I was on that list. I was, there were, and people knew me for doing a lot of the funky records or getting that kind of New York funk sound through just doing jingles and being around the composers, and that offered me a glimpse into the scoring world and working with film, which is something I love. I absolutely love. And what's funny is that I'm very much, I draw upon my roots of where growing up around opera. It parallels the music that you see in cinema, the opera world, or just theater itself. The modern cinema is really our new version of theater, and that music using incidental music is very abstract in a way. It's not like a melody. It could be just like a weird interval or something, how it accentuates a scene. And those things happen all the time in opera. And it's funny, I remember just going like, what is that sound? It would always be, so, as a child, it would just be kind of weird because it would give you a feeling, but it wasn't like a melody that you could sing. I related all those experiences into doing sessions and learning about the scoring process. And I ended up getting some jobs working with Broadcast Arts, which was these good buddies of mine, David LeBold and Zach Smith, who ended up moving at Zach right now is the director of music production for Apple Computers. And Dave LeBolt was the CEO of Digidesign for years. So these guys both went on to do amazing things, but I worked with them on so many jingles. We actually won an award for the Cotton commercial with Richie Havens singing. That's me on guitar, playing acoustic guitar. The touch, the feel, the fabric of our lives. If you listen to that, I actually played on the first Hot Pockets ad, by the way. So whenever Jim Gaffigan does his skit about Hot Pockets, I'm like, I get a little personal pride. I get a little pride out of that one. You know, like I'm such a fan. I learned about that, and then finally, with the System, this band that I was with David Frank, who I met from the Madonna band, he had actually formed another band called the System, and I ended up playing all the guitars on them. We worked on Coming to America. There was a Secret of My Success. There's I actually worked with Stephen Bray on a film called Earth Girls Are Easy. So these are all, early films, like kind of films in the 80s.
Roxanne was one of them too, right?
Oh, Roxanne. Yes. I co-wrote that song with Jeff Kent and Terry Cox.
What great music in that one. You know, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There are a lot of things that you did that were pretty powerful at that time.
Yes, yeah, and I actually play a vampire in Buffy in the gym scene. If you look, it's me. I'm one of the vampires. You know, they say, "Oh, he's got long hair. It's cool. Let's just put some teeth on him in the ears." So that was fun for me. I really loved doing that.
If you think about your career and all these different aspects of what's happening, and part of again, these interviews, Paul, are about really kind of allowing young artists to see the potential of being a good person, showing up on time, having great skills of your craft, being open-minded, having good people skills. These are all these qualities that you have. And it really is amazing to see now in these times now during this pandemic, we're in this pandemic. How are you keeping yourself motivated musically? Because there's no live music now. So what's happening? Are you redesigning what you do?
Well, actually, it's I'm probably one of the more fortunate ones. There's a lot of people who are working on their records because they're home. I've gotten some session work, to play on people's records. I just worked on the new. There's a movie coming out in I think it's in August now, August 21. It's supposed to be out this month, but I think they pushed it off, waiting for theaters to open up again. But it's a movie called Respect, which is the story. It's the Aretha Franklin story, and Stephen Bray is the music producer, the producer of the music of the tracks for that. And any of the scenes where they're in the studio, like working out parts, I did the guitars for that. Nice. For those scenes, and like where they're figuring out. They did versions of some of the songs, like, oh, let's do kind of bluesy shuffle. That's not it. And then there's a scene where they kind of the one guitar player goes da 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 da. They're like, that's it. So it was funny. I wasn't really acting that much. I mean, I offered the sound. They have actors doing it, but it's that's the place I dwell. That's where I live. It's funny. A friend of mine was telling me once. He goes, you play on so many records, but oftentimes I'm like fighting to kind of hear you. I don't hear you sticking out, and I'm like, well, because I'm kind of blending into the sauce maybe a little bit, but because you're like the invisible guitar player. I'm like, well, then I take that as a compliment, really, because I try to, there's one way of putting your stamp on something, and that's always kind of doing your thing. But in a way, I'm almost like a chameleon of sorts. In that movie, do you know the movie Zelig? With Woody Allen, where he would like take on the characteristics of people that he was around. Yeah. I'm kind of like that, Well, I'll come in and I'll blend into and if they want me to stand out, I will. But oftentimes, a lot like in R&B, they mix the guitar into the keys, whereas in rock, it's a lot guitar and they mix the keys to embellish and make the overall sound bigger. But oftentimes the guitar is just like like find these little spots to fit in and meld with the rhythm.
There's a certain personality that has to go with the fact of being a chameleon that allows you to fit in so comfortably well that you're not standing out, you are complementing and totally serving the music.
Right. You have to honor the music and really serve the song. I really, it's funny because I've been thinking about how, what is it? How would I describe how I approach a session? And it would be, a perfect term would be blank slate. I come in with a blank slate and allow myself to be led or by the music that's there, but then also the producer, the singer, the songwriter, to communicate to me what they hear, how they imagine this to be fleshed out. And that's my job, really, to flesh out or offer up ideas, if they don't know what they want. The thing is, don't get married to an idea and don't think of it as an insult if somebody doesn't like your first idea. And oftentimes what happens is you go through a couple things and then you end up back at the first idea and like, oh no, I like that. Goes, okay.
Absolutely. But this is what's magic about, I had the chance of interviewing Steve Lukather, and the same thing, you got to just kind of throw these ideas out and you just create in the moment, in the now, at that
in the moment. Exactly. That's people ask me where I live, and I always tell them in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's really where all the great things happen. Now,
Right.
We talk about the business part of what we have here, because branding yourself as an artist, that's your product. Now, the business side really, Paul, is about how do you deliver that? You have a very clear brand in the name Paul Pesco. I mean, you've got a brand.
Yes. How
do you organize that? Are you a disciplined person? How do you keep all that going?
There are several parts to that answer, I think. Don't be discouraged by how slow things happen sometimes, because that's how it happens for everybody. It seems like it was overnight success, but that overnight success happened over the course of 10 years, probably. You don't see the stuff that led to that. Take the analogy of the rabbit and the turtle. I know a lot of rabbits, and I don't see any of them, but I'm like the guy. I was like the turtle, man. I just keep putting one foot in front of the other and just keep walking forward and just, doing. And I've been so lucky to get some amazing gigs, but oftentimes, those closest to me go, Paul, what's happening? It's like, nothing's happening. I'm like, no, this is always how it's been. But you have to be patient. A lot of people need security. And that's one thing you got to get used to, is there's very little security in the beginning stages of becoming an artist. And it's tough. It's not for everybody. I know it's not for the faint of heart, but
sometimes insecurity becomes your security.
Right. Exactly. Just, it's funny how here we are in the pandemic, and it's like, welcome to my world.
Totally.
We're so used to working in isolation in front of a monitor, to, working on my computer. And so my world hasn't changed much, except when I leave the studio, like my family's always home, and and everybody's kind of, it's the world has changed outside, but my life inside the studio is still the same. So I come here. This is my sanctuary.
What a wonderful sanctuary to have. So in the process of being able to be organized, there's got to be a certain organizational skill that you
Definitely
have to maintain all this, right?
Yes, for sure. I have a lot of music books. I love collecting books and information, and I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly re-educating myself, and I know that I need to become more savvy with my social media. And it's funny. I am a classic guitar player. I'm like the last. We came to the game late. We were usually the last guys to get a computer out of the band. The keyboard player was always the first guy. He had the drum machine. He had the laptop. Guitar players, we got our gear. We have our pedals. We got our amp. I'm really well versed in studio technology and stuff, but I need to really focus a little bit more upon my web presence and so I have my website. I use a lot of collaborating software. There's a software called SessionWire that I use. I love, and Source Connect, and there are many others. But and learn from people who are really mastering the game, like people like Rick Beato and these YouTubers that are just incredible. It's funny, without a product, they're out there. They're selling their personality, and it's this huge success, and it's pretty amazing.
And all this knowledge that they have and that you have and the experience that we have is being packaged in a way that's allowing other people to be inspired to grow. And by following their YouTube channel and then allowing advertisement to be a part of it, mean, this is a real part of it. And then subscribing to it, as we have with the Sessions panel on YouTube. I tell people subscribe to it. All of these interviews, we've got over 300 interviews.
That's
now
amazing.
that you have joined some of the greatest, guitar players, Steve Vai, the Paul Gilberts, the Paul Pescos now, the Steve Lukather's.
Well, I'm honored. I'm honored to be considered among that group of people because I'm a huge fan.
You've etched yourself in the business where you've done so many great things and you continue doing it from your studio, but you stay driven. You stay motivated. What motivates you?
It's funny. It's a quest for knowledge I listen to my favorite guitarists, my favorite musicians. It's funny. I tend to listen to more saxophone players, but I love, I love modern music. Like a lot of the pop, my kids end up being a great gauge for me because I'll listen to stuff that they're listening to. I really like Dua Lipa. I think Post Malone is a great singer. I love how the production. That there's a song called Roses by St. John, where they took a vocal, pitched it up, and then do this very cool. It was a remix. I think I forget exactly who the DJ was that did the remix, but it's really creative, and I love creativity and taking something to another place. It disappoints me that jazz isn't more popular. It's an acquired taste. I know that jazz isn't for everybody, but I love it. I love jazz. I listen to Michael Brecker all the time. I love, Coltrane, Art Tatum, Charlie Parker, Joe Henderson, those amongst my favorite musicians, John Scofield. It's kind of my favorite guitar player.
How great to hear these great jazz players that have offered truly an American music that is a whole nother language. So to understand it, we have to begin to learn the language.
Yeah, it's right. That's how actually when I like my wife and kids, they can't listen to it. My stations that I like to listen to in the car, when they're in the car, they're like, "No, Dad, no," So, it is it's an acquired taste. You have to. It's like not understanding French and being stuck in the middle of France, going, "Oh no, I don't understand anything. This just sounds." Or Portuguese. My wife's Brazilian, so when she's like speaking muy rápido, it's like speaking very fast. I can't. It sounds. I'm like fighting to like where do the words end and where do the words begin? I'm like it all sounds like one sound now, and I can't. It's difficult. But when people sing in Portuguese, it's probably one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard.
It really is. Well, you continue to pursue and to grow, and I love the fact that you have embraced the constant learning part of this journey.
Yeah, there's so much. I mean, my God, I love listening to Bulería, the Spanish. I got to tour with Alejandro Sanz, so I actually was like put right into like this amazing music. He's an amazing guitar player himself. He and Paco de Lucia, that's his best friend. His daughter's godfather is Paco. Yeah. So I got to learn, and they taught me how to count the way they do. For the Bulería. Do you know the how they count? It's 12.
It's 12. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah. It's 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And they do this little flip, like almost like the Indian people count.
Yeah.
It's incredible. There's so much though. So realizing that there's all this rich, all this information, all these languages to learn. It's just there's an unending quest of discovery, really. And I love African music. I love Algerian music. Karim Ziad. Are you hip to Karim?
Very much so.
One of my favorite drummers, man. Oh my God.
Unique.
Yeah, and the use of oud and all the African instruments. There's I don't even know. It's like a berimbau almost, like dum dum do ba dum 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 do ba dum 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 do ba dum dum dum. There's like a groove there. The way they feel time, the way Brazilians feel time, is like a whole other thing. It's loosey goosey. It's like they rush and then they so there's so much, like even within a style of music to learn the way they feel time. There's different ways. That's something that keeps me growing as well.
Well, what I want the message to be heard in this part of it is the fact that You're still growing. You're still learning. You are, an open mind, as Frank Zappa said, is like a parachute. It only works when it's open.
When it's open, exactly. Yeah, it's funny. I have to look at myself and remind myself that I'm 61 years old now, and that I still feel like I'm just starting out.
Yeah,
I'm just getting started. So in that way, I feel fresh. It's not old. I don't think I ever will.
Well, I think that's the message that we have in this interview, and the fact that you are still at the cusp of learning and growing and discovering, whether it's both in the creative and music part of it, but also in the business side. You're still pushing yourself
Yes.
in the brand of what you're doing and the networking now with social media. You're still learning and growing and experimenting. And this really is where success lives.
Yeah, I agree. I agree so much. And it's funny how sometimes you don't even realize, I've worked with some friends of mine. Jerry Wanda is a producer I work with, a bass player from the Fugees, and we've done so many records together. And we'll like get in the studio and write 5 tracks a night, And sometimes there's like that one that we did, and sometimes you don't realize this is, until after it's done. When you're in the thick of it, you just kind of, this fits here. We just like, let's do this. The creative process. And then when you step back and you go, oh, that is really good. And sometimes you don't know what's going to be the truly big successful track. And then when it happens, you just go, oh, that's cool.
Absolutely. But again, it goes back to that in the moment and in the now. When you think about it, Paul, and what you've done, Steve Winwood, Joan Baez, Cher,
Yes.
Whitney Houston, Al Green, Roberta Flack, Mariah Carey, Hall & Oates, Annie Lennox, Jennifer,
Yes.
Alicia Keys. You have really kind of opened up the doors of allowing your chameleon type of playing to be reached out, your networking, your personality. You have all the qualities that I want this next generation to really understand. Not only have you done it, but you're continuing to do it. And that's the magic at where you are now.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. When you mention all those names, then I go, yep, I was there. I remember that. But it's just, I feel so fortunate to have worked with all these people. And I really did learn so much. The Al Green record, so I play on the single for that record. I played on 5 songs on that album. And for me, it's like the shining, it's like really just a proud moment to be the guitar player on an Al Green record. But Love Is a Beautiful Thing. I get a nice little solo, and they really mix my guitar loud. I was like, wow, it's really kind of cool.
Well, Paul, I have to thank you so much on behalf of the Sessions at a Distance. I look forward to when we can get together again and continue this interview even in person, and maybe at some point even in
Let's keep the dialogue going for sure, man. And I want to introduce us to some of my other friends, who you should. Yeah, I'm actually working today here at the studio with the son of Billy Eckstein, Guy Eckstein, who is actually, he was the president of Verve Records for a while, but now he's more focused on artist management and production. And I know that he'd be somebody you would love to speak with.
That would be wonderful. Keep us posted with all of them, because we want to continue to introduce these great dedicated musicians, and not only how we perform as artists, but the business side of what we're doing is such an important part. You are doing it constantly. The takeaway on this is that you truly are the constant student and the constant learner. For that, Paul, I thank you so much on behalf of the Sessions.
Thank you, Tom.
Stay safe. I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Dom Famularo here, the Sessions panel. This is so exciting. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Click the subscribe button to be a part of what we're doing. The views help us tremendously. All of your comments, we read them and react to them. This is incredible. The support you're giving us is great. The Sessions panel. We'll see you real soon.